What's up, YouTube? Any mention that I make of JW.org, Jehovah's Witnesses, their digital, online, or printed materials is done under the Copyright Disclaimer, Copyright Act of 1976 for fair use for purposes such as criticism, news reporting, and teaching, research too, etc., etc. Peace. What's up, everybody? It is Saturday here in Wisconsin, so it's Saturday everywhere in the U.S. So anywhere else in the world, it might be the end of Saturday and the beginning of Sunday, or the beginning of Saturday but not quite noonish like it is here. Anyway, this should be short. I don't have any notes, nothing formal planned, but earlier in the week, a few days ago, I was running errands between the north and the south sides of town, and those errands had me in a coincidental bump into in conversation, a super brief conversation with a family member who's still Jehovah's Witness. And that conversation brought back to my mind a thought I had well over a year ago and have forgotten. So a tip, if you have thoughts and you can't express them immediately, like writers and poets and artists of other kind that do express themselves in some form of medium outside of just their inner thoughts, write it down or record it briefly in like a voice recording on your phone, something, because comedians lose jokes, writers lose ideas, and that's what happened to me. So take like 5 seconds and scratch paper something so later you can say, oh yeah, I thought about this thing, and expound on it. So I bump into this family member. They ask me more or less, not even more or less, directly, are you going to meetings? And they know my story, which I expressed in my first 2 videos. So they understand that I was on the verge of being reinstated after 5 letters in 20 months. 22 months. And in my last elders meeting after my 5th letter, the elders wanted to know who I had been talking to while disfellowship, that were disfellowship. So they're asking me, have you talked to, you told us you talked to some disfellowship people you knew through text messages to encourage them to go to meetings. So we want their names. And I refuse to give their names and thank them for meeting with me. They got verbally and physically, like through their body language, you could tell they were frustrated that I refused to name people. And I got up and essentially thanked them and left. So this family member knows that story. So they asked me, have you gone back to meetings yet? And I said, well, this month, February of 2018, that will be a year. So they said to me, knowing how things went down a year ago, basically, they said, you served Jehovah for almost 40 years. You loved Jehovah. You supported his organization. Why would you let the way these imperfect men handle you keep you from coming back to Jehovah? So in essence, which I've done this to people before, you assume that they're still angry about being heavily disciplined, treated badly due to partiality or prejudice, or some elders kind of present themselves like, we finally caught you or got you and now we can do to you what we wanted to do to you years ago. You know, it's almost like it's the Wild West and you're some outlaw, and now they have enough witnesses or a confession and they can string you up. And these incidents, Jehovah's Witnesses act like these aggressive, unloving elders because they'll treat you like this often, whether you confess or not. And witnesses will write these times off or these incidences off like they're isolated. But this is a theme internationally with Jehovah's Witnesses and elders that go in these meetings and they power trip on people that they've been waiting to discipline or that they don't believe are sorry and repentant. So then they hand out very heavy discipline. Or if it's their friend or someone they sympathize with personally, aside from the Bible, the discipline is very light. And people commit the same moral crimes, and then they get different levels of discipline for it because the elders who were selected to deal with them don't like them, or they like them so much they say, well, I know this guy or this woman and they've been through a lot, so. And then there are times when they haven't liked you for years and now they have you in their grasp theocratically and they abuse that power. So JWs don't see this as a sign of like, maybe the Holy Spirit or God isn't with this organization. These are just isolated incidents of men acting out of turn. And wait on Jehovah, he will fix it. So this family member knows this story about me, and they essentially say, why let these men and their poor spiritual handling of your case stop you from coming back to Jehovah? And prior to saying this, just like a witness does at the door or in any other circumstance where they know they're right and they don't want you to argue back, this family member prefaced their statement of encouragement with, I'm going to say this and we don't want to get into a discussion about it, so not for us to discuss it, but I do want to say this to you. So in essence, they're like, I'm going to talk, you're going to listen, don't rebuttal. It is also against JW rules for JWs to engage in Bible discussion with an apostate, I hate that word, an inactive person, maybe, but definitely a disfellowship person. They shouldn't be having a biblical banter. And it's because the branch knows apostates and those who have done research, they know the truth about the truth, and they don't want their faithful rank and file sheep to be exposed to that and then start thinking twice about what they're hearing and learning. So she says to me, I'm going to say this, but not so we can get into a discussion. I just want to say this to you and then I'll let you go. So I'm going to speak, you're going to listen. Don't talk back or don't reply. I think that's the essence of being dogmatic, but I'm not sure. So anyway, after that statement or disclaimer of no discussion, she then says, you should come back. Don't let imperfect men and their mishandling of your situation and being heavy-handed in your discipline and unreasonable stop you from coming back and loving Jehovah. So I had a couple thoughts while she was talking, because this is field service, right? So in field service training, you learn to think like a step or two ahead of the householder so you can rebuttal or kindly say, a lot of your neighbors, even myself, have thought that. You don't care what they're saying because you just want to spit out what you prepared on Friday night before you met the group Saturday morning to go door knocking. But anyway, I think people forget that when they engage ex-witnesses or ex-JWs that we lived it, so we know all of the, I don't want to call them tricks, but tactics. We know all the tactics. So she said this thing about don't talk back, don't respond, there won't be a discussion, but I want to talk at you. So while she was speaking her few sentences, I started to think two thoughts, like, should I let her know that if God exists, no man can dare tell you how God feels about you, or let alone that God no longer is pleased with you and God doesn't want to deal with you. You're in a bad place with God. Of all people, JWs claim to, like many other churches, understand what God thinks of individuals. Like, God's in heaven on his throne, and he's just like thinking these things about Joe Schmo or Sally Sue or whoever. And JWs, especially elders, think they know what God thinks about you. Like, that's why they put you out. You're not repenting. We prayed and the Spirit told us to put you out. You're dangerous. Like, they're telling us they understand God's thoughts when they know scriptures say God is above us and we can't. So anyway, I thought, should I say that no man can separate you from God's love? And Jesus said that repentance comes with sincerely saying, basically, I'm sorry to God and believing in the ransom. Then my other thought was, well, let's talk about or keep it about imperfect man. So I said to her, I don't want to get in a discussion with you, but I want to leave you a question. If these elders made a move that was unloving and unkind in the name of God or Jehovah, and with that they've oppressed someone, abused their power, been unloving and unkind, why hasn't God done something about that? I said, if you owned a company and you got wind of multiple managers and bosses who work for you were mistreating your other employees terribly, your instinct is to immediately investigate it and get rid of these people who are not representing you correctly. You would fire people left and right, finding out that these allegations are true about them stepping on your employees' necks. So they went on to respond, which surprised me, and they said, well, that's how a human would respond to what they thought was abuse. But we have to wait on Jehovah because his thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and some things he does we can't explain. So if he's using them now, then we have to basically go with it. I said to this person, well, aren't you created in God's image? They said yes. I said, okay, so if you did have people managing your business who were abusive, and you did feel like justice is getting rid of these people so that your workers aren't abused and have a more pleasant experience, maybe you got that sense of justice from God who created you in his image. Well, let's see what you're saying. Yeah, I said, so don't try to convince me or explain to me how God works or why God hasn't taken care of these abusive elders that are in congregation after city, after state, after US after Canada, wherever, Australia, because it's nation and international. It's national and international. So I know they blew off what I said, but for not even a second did this witness stop to think like, yeah, if humans fix problems rather quickly, you know what I'm saying? Like, maybe the church hides some abuse and this man is able to do dirty things for years because it's hidden. But once a person in power knows that a wrong thing is happening and it's victimizing people, this wrong thing from this person, they deal with that person. Like, the court system is backed up, but they're like, you're gonna sit in jail until we can figure out what you've been up to and how you should be punished. Why does God just wait it out? Like, why does he let you endure? He's just sitting there again on his throne, and these bogus elders know that they're showing partiality or cutting their friend a break, or they're going to teach this smart mouth sister a lesson and kind of deal with her with some weight behind it, which is too much because Jesus and God forgive instantly and they forget about it, and up to 77 times, right? And God just watches this. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's just watching it. But when she couldn't answer that, she's like, well, God's thoughts, you know, they're beyond us. But I think I did just try to speak for God by telling you come back because you're not with God. I understood God's thoughts on that, but I can't claim to explain why he waits around when we, created in his image, we just sit there. We don't just sit there, we do something about it, you know? So that made me think of another thing, is if we all know, and all JWs know for themselves, and they have like 20 friends who have been treated poorly by the elders in whatever old congregation or their new congregation or whatever. We all have stories. Every JW has a story, at least one. So that's about 8 million stories, right? The point is this.
Because there are 8 million JWs in the world.
If you know the elders were abusive and heavy-handed and partial, and they make a decree through that partiality and that abuse of power, why do we respect it? Because if they, under God's name and as a representative of God and as their book for elders reads, they're judging for Jehovah. If they poorly handle and again use prejudice, partiality, a vengeful spirit to deal with a person harshly, and multiple people know in the congregation, in that person's family, why do we respect the decision? It's not from God, obviously, right? Because God isn't partial and God isn't abusive and God isn't unbalanced. So when these elders do unbalanced things in God's name, why do we respect it? They just fellowship a sister who didn't deserve it. Some circumstantial evidence. They don't understand the psychology of people because they don't study psychology. They exile her. Now she has a struggle at work, at home. She's alone, going to meeting, being ignored. We know they dealt with her horribly. And then we respect the decision like it is from God. They deal with her horribly in God's name. And then we just sit there like, we're going to ignore you because the decision came down. You're done. It wasn't from God if it was mishandled, right? So then why do we respect the decision? Fear.